Blackened Wish, Chapter 4, Decision. Emotions are a mysterious, powerful thing. Even if logic dictates that someone go one way, their heart could sway them in a completely different direction. They know how much it might hurt them later, but they still choose it anyway. It's part of what makes people human. A certain red-headed princess was learning that lesson all too quickly. Her brain screamed how it was a bad idea to get even further involved with the crazy lunatic boy that had nearly kidnapped her. But she just had to know. How did he get in the castle? What was he really after? And more importantly, what was that gift of his? The one thing that fascinated her even more than fairy tales were gifts. After spending nearly half her life reading every book about them that she could get her hands on, she considered herself somewhat of an expert on the subject. She knew more about gifts than anyone in the castle, except for the super smarties like the royal bookkeeper. She could never remember his official title, so she settled for calling him that. Nathan's gift had been such a shock to her system that she simply could not resist the temptation. She really wanted to know what creature it came from, but she'd take any nugget of information she could get. The only way to get that information was to go straight to the source, and if she didn't move quickly, she'd lose her chance to ask him. To make matters worse, she'd also heard some shocking news on the way back to her room. Her father was attacked in his study last night, and everyone suspected Nathan for that as well. But Stella didn't want to believe that. It made sense and answered a lot of her questions, but there was something about him that made her unwilling to accept that he was the culprit. Maybe it was the sad look on his face when the guards carried him off to the dungeon. Those weren't the eyes of a killer being carted off to prison. They were the eyes of a terrified, innocent boy that was begging for help. That was why she'd slipped out of her room again the following morning and headed for the study. She wanted to confirm with her own eyes what had happened, but also she needed to grab a special key her father kept hidden there. He'd shown her where it was and told her only to use it during emergencies. As far as she was concerned, this situation definitely counted as one. When she got to the study, she was greeted with an empty room. The only evidence of an attack was the blood on the floor and the chair. That was all she needed to see. She knew she was looking at the cold, hard reality that her father had been assassinated, and there was no choice but to accept it.
Did he? No, there's no way he did this. I have to go talk to him.
Trying her hardest to ignore the queasy feeling in her gut, she crept over to the bookcase and plucked out a certain book. It looked like a perfectly mundane copy of Gifts and You, a comprehensive guide to gifts that was so commonplace you could find it on nearly anyone's bookshelf. But hidden in the thick tomes cover was the hidden treasure she was looking for. According to what her father had told her, it was a magic key that could open any lock, no matter the type. That made it sound awesome and useful, but it looked more evil than good. Frankly, she kinda hated the thing. Just looking at it seemed to give her chills, and when she held it in her hand, she felt a pulsing heat. It was almost like a heartbeat, as if the key was somehow alive. Swallowing her nerves, she replaced the book and left the study, making a beeline for the dungeon. She'd expected to have to dodge some guards, but to her surprise, the hallways were empty. In fact, she didn't meet anyone on the way down. The whole castle seemed to have an eerie atmosphere, despite the rising sun providing plenty of light. Still, she had more important things to worry about at the moment. Namely, talking to a certain ashen-haired boy whom she couldn't get out of her head. Questions were gnawing at her, and she wasn't going to stop until they were answered.
I don't expect you to forgive me.
When she heard him say that, she knew she'd made the right decision. He was innocent. That was how she saw it, at least. He didn't do it of his own will. He did it because he had to. Thinking about it like that, she couldn't be upset at him. It wasn't his fault. But not blaming him wasn't going to bring her dad back. She ignored that as long as she could, but as she reached the staircase leading out of the dungeon, her eyes welled up with tears. She only made it up 3 steps before she stumbled and fell to the cold, hard stone. Her shoulder ached where she landed on it, But she didn't notice the pain. She didn't have the strength to pick herself up. All she could do was cry. A loud, angry shout from the top of the stairs barely registered in her brain. Through her still blurry vision, she could just make out the head maid and a group of guards. Ordering the guards to fetch the prisoner, Hilda yanked the princess to her feet. "Stella Danae Varden, you are in quite a lot of trouble. I made it very clear you are not to leave your room for any reason. This is precisely why I can't let you out of my sight for a single second." Stella instinctively shivered. She'd never seen Hilda this angry before. Compared to this, being held at knife point by Nathan seemed almost comforting. "Did you forget that you were nearly kidnapped last night? And that same criminal also murdered your father? And yet here you are, wandering around like you don't care what happens to you? What do you have to say for yourself, young lady? Answer me!" Her lips quivering, Stella forced out an explanation. He's innocent." "What are you babbling about, girl? Speak up!" Normally, she wouldn't dare stand up to Hilda, but this time she had to. Mustering up every ounce of courage she had, she looked her caretaker in the eyes. "I said he's innocent. He didn't kidnap me. I asked him to take me away. And he didn't kill father either." "Then pray tell who did. This is a very serious matter, Stella. I just know isn't going to cut it. Do you have any proof he's innocent?" "No, but I..." "Then get your head out of the clouds and wake up! Face it, your father is dead, and nothing is going to change that. We have enough problems to deal with right now, and you running around the castle like a madwoman is making things worse." "But if I don't do something, he'll be killed." Stella opened her mouth to say that, but before she could, the guards reappeared. All of them had the same stupefied expression. "Lady Hilda! It's the prisoner! He's gone!" "What?" Hilda's eyes nearly popped out of her head. "What do you mean he's gone?" "The cell is empty! He must have escaped somehow!" Hilda ground her teeth, throwing the guards a fiery glare that made them shrink back. "You incompetent buffoons better find him, or I'll have your heads on a pike!" "Yes, ma'am!" Nodding quickly, the guards raced up the stairs out of the dungeon. Mentally, Stella breathed a sigh of relief.
"I made it just in time. Thank the stars. Please, Nathan, get out of here before they catch you again."
Hilda's bone-chilling stare then settled on her. It seemed to pierce through to her core, as if daring her to talk her way out of the situation. She couldn't stop herself from trembling. The headmaid's eyes widened for an instant. In that brief second, Stella feared the worst. Then Hilda spoke, her face twisting into a scowl.
"You did this, didn't you? You set him free."
Stella tried to object, but her voice died in her throat. The pressure of Hilda's gaze was simply too much. She couldn't possibly lie. The color drained from Hilda's face, her hands shaking. She glanced around the corridor before speaking again.
"Do you realize what you've done?"
Stella gulped, steeling herself.
I don't want him to die. He's innocent, I swear."
Hilda scrutinized her for a long moment. Then, with a frustrated sigh, she softened her voice.
"Look at me, Stella. I want to believe you. As your caretaker, I want to be on your side. But my position requires me to be impartial. There's more than enough evidence to find him guilty of all charges, and I can't simply ignore that. Unless you have some hard proof that he's innocent, I'm afraid I have no other choice."
Biting her lip, Hilda dragged Stella toward the prison cells and pushed her into one.
"Wait, Hilda, what are you—"
The headmaid simply shook her head as she latched the door shut.
"I'm sorry, Stella, but what you've done, it's treason. You're just as guilty as he is, so I have to lock you up too."
"But—"
"Please don't make this any harder. This is already difficult enough for me."
Ignoring Stella's protests, she simply walked away, the loud clip-clop of her footsteps gradually fading into the distance. Stella tried pulling on the cell door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked tight, and Hilda had taken the key with her.
If only I hadn't given Father's key to Nathan.
The musty dungeon air reeked of mold, sweat, and a hint of blood. She dealt with it earlier when she came down to talk to Nathan, but now that she was stuck in it, she had to fight back the urge to puke. Holding her breath as much as she could, she sank to the floor.
This is awful. We really make people live like this? What kind of barbarians are we? When I get out of here, I'm going to talk to Mother about this. Even if they are criminals, that doesn't mean we should treat them so horribly.
You really are an idiot, aren't you? Stella jerked her head up to the voice. Someone approached her cell from the shadows, and as they drew closer, she recognized that familiar head of ashen hair.
What's he doing here? Didn't he escape earlier?
Stella tried to ask these questions, but then gagged on the foul-tasting air that was practically choking her. Going this far to defend me? I should be the one behind bars, not you. Yet here we are. This isn't some fairy tale paradise that works the way you want it to, you know.
I know that, but...
A ghost of a smile creased his lips. But the world needs more idiots like you. People that only see the good in others, and remind us that things aren't always doom and gloom.
What is he trying to say? First he insults me, then it sounds like he's praising me? Make up your mind, you're confusing me.
I guess I'm an idiot too. Here I am talking to you about this when I could be escaping. It's just... Nathan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. What I'm trying to say is, even after what I did, you still wanted to help me. All I've done is use you and yell at you, but you still bailed me out. When I think about all that, I can't just leave you in here. Stella blinked, eyes wide, as he pulled out her father's key and fitted it into the lock. I know this isn't enough to apologize for your dad or for scaring you like I did. I understand if you don't trust me anymore, but this is the least I can do. And if you still want me to get you out of the castle, then let's hurry before someone comes down here.
He gave up his chance to escape just to come back for me. He didn't abandon me, even when everyone else was against him. I knew it. He really is my knight in shining armor. Why did I ever doubt him?
As the cell door opened, Stella picked herself up and smiled at him.
Take me away, my handsome prince.